If you enjoy what you hear here today, please consider supporting me on my Patreon page. Every dollar helps, and you get to see content that you won't see here. Chapter 3. Planning. The window curtains were open just enough to let a thin ray of light in, and Silverquill was in just the right position for said light to shine on his sleeping eyes. He squinted and muttered in his drowsiness, irritated that the inanimate energy had the gall to wake him up so rudely. With a groan, he turned on his side, facing away from the window, and slowly drifted back into the land of dreams. He sighed contentedly, and as luck would have it, that content did not last. Several sharp knocks came from the front of the house, loud enough to reverberate throughout the entire building. Silverquill gritted his teeth in annoyance and ignored the rude pony vying for his attention. After a little bit of silence, the knocks came again, each one jarring Silverquill with its loudness. He had to force himself to not jump out of bed and give this pony a verbal lashing the likes of which they had never seen. But he restrained himself, and when 30 seconds went by without him hearing anything, he sighed and settled down again. Some ponies, he muttered. Soon after that, he heard a shuffling noise from the side of the house, right outside his bedroom window. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. Silverquill slowly rose from the comfort of his bed and groggily walked to the window. When he opened the curtains, he was greeted with the face of a dark blue pony with her muzzle smushed up against the glass. The pony grinned happily at Silverquill's shock.
Salutations, young Silverquill. Art thou ready to start thy vacation?
Silverquill could do nothing but stare at the face of a very happy princess. After a few seconds of being bewildered, Silverquill closed the curtains, counted to 5, and opened the curtains again. Much to his chagrin, the supremely delighted pony was not a figment of his imagination. Only when Luna lifted her hoof and gently tapped on the glass of the window did he realize he should open it. What in the world are you doing, Luna? As hard as he tried to suppress it, Silverquill couldn't prevent a hint of annoyance creeping into his voice. Luna, however, appeared to be far too excited to notice it.
Why, Silverquill, we are here to see thou off on thy sabbatical.
Silverquill blinked, not comprehending. While his body was awake, his mind was not. I'm sorry, Luna, you're gonna have to explain yourself a bit better than that. Luna merely laughed and shook her head.
We are afraid that explanation shall have to wait, young Silverquill. For now thou must get out of bed and make thyself presentable. Our sister Celestia has summoned you.
Silverquill blinked several times before sighing and turning away. Of course Princess Celestia wants to talk to me. Why in the world would it be anything else? Because that makes total sense. Luna beamed at him.
Verily, we shall be waiting for thee outside of thy house.
Silverquill chuckled at Luna's inability to detect sarcasm and said, All right, I'll be out shortly. Luna nodded happily and walked away from his bedroom window. After about 10 minutes of freshening up, brushing his teeth, and getting his mane in order, Silverquill made his way out of the front door to meet with his excited friend. He found Luna in a drowsy state of happiness, her eyes glazed over and her body slowly swaying with the breeze. Apparently, she didn't realize just how strange she looked, because she did not react in the slightest when ponies walked by staring at her. Silver had to wave his hoof in front of her face and call out to her to snap her back to reality. After several blinks and a confused exclamation, she burst into a wide smile.
Ah, Silverquill, art thou ready to depart?
Silverquill looked closely at her. As far as he could tell, there was no reason for her to be so bubbly. It wasn't her normal behavior, that was for sure. although he didn't know what she was like during the day, since all their meetings happened at the same spot and at night. "As ready as I'll ever be to meet Princess Celestia," he replied. Luna looked at him with surprise on her face.
"Oh, art thou nervous to meet our sister for the first time?"
Silverquill looked up at her and shook his head. "To be honest, Luna, I'm more confused than I am nervous. From what you told me about her, I think I won't have any problems. But what I want to know is why she wants to see me, and why so early?" Luna nodded.
Now we understand."
She peered down at Silver, trying to reassure him with her gaze.
"The reason for our sister's sudden interest in thou, young Silverquill, is that she kindly agreed to find a suitable location for thy sabbatical upon our asking."
Silverquill's eyes widened in surprise. "You asked her for a place for me to take my vacation? What did she say?" Luna thought for a moment, making Silverquill slightly nervous. What did she have to think about? Once Luna was satisfied with her answer, she said,
"Well, we did not ask our sister to find you the right location, per se. It was more that we asked her to confirm that thou were able to stay there."
When Silverquill's expression made it obvious that she would have to go into more detail, she continued.
"What we mean to say is that we know the perfect place for thou to take thy sabbatical, but we needed our sister to confirm thy living arrangements."
Luna smiled down at him.
"Do not worry, young Silverquill, our sister shall explain in greater detail."
Well, Silver could do nothing but shrug. No point in pushing the issue, he figured. The rest of the walk to the castle was filled with companionable small talk. They chatted about the latest news in Equestria, what was going on in the literature industry, and Luna's musings about getting back into music. As they walked and talked, they were the subject of interest for many passing ponies. The Princess of the Night was very rarely ever seen in public, especially in broad daylight. While Luna was blissfully unaware of all the attention they were receiving, Silverquill just decided to ignore it, though he did find himself thankful that it was early in the morning, so there weren't too many ponies out. After maybe 20 minutes, they reached the castle. And Silver had been inside it several times before, and it never failed to take his breath away. The statues made by master artisans from all over Equestria, the priceless works of art made by artists who have been dead for centuries, the precious minerals and gemstones throughout the castle were expertly placed to complement the decor, but never enough to make it overwhelming to the eyes. It was perfect. It really was a marvel, a testimonial that showed what ponies were truly capable of. Silver followed Luna up the wide marble staircase in the main hall, trusting her not to lead him astray. As they made their way through the many halls of the castle, Silver once again found himself pondering what had Luna in such a fine fiddle. Normally he was quite skilled at telling what other ponies were feeling and why, but this time, he was coming up blank. He decided to pay a little mind and instead focused on the task at hand, which was not making a fool out of himself in front of Princess Celestia. Luna stopped walking in front of a particularly extravagant door, even for this castle. It was made of a dark red mahogany and looked as though 4 average-sized ponies standing on each other's backs would have little difficulty walking right through. With a smile, Luna hammered on the door, sending several loud bangs echoing down the wide corridor and making Silverquill flinch. The door opened slowly on silent hinges. Luna nodded at him and walked in. Silverquill looked around, curious what this room was. The walls lined with bookshelves that reached the high ceiling, the single desk on one side of the room, and the lack of other furnishing suggested that it was the princess's private study. The Sun Princess herself was standing at her desk, reading a letter, but put it down to address them.
"Dear sister, what have I told you about knocking? Your goal is to get the other pony's attention, not destroy the door."
Princess Celestia smiled tiredly at Luna, who blushed slightly. Well, this was apparently an issue that was familiar to the two of them. And after the way that Luna abused his own poor door, Silver Quill could understand why.
Our apologies, sister. We were just a little bit too excited.
Celestia laughed at her sister's antics.
Clearly you were.
She then smiled politely at Silver Quill.
And this must be the pony that you spoke about.
Luna was instantly excited again at her mentioning of Silver Quill.
Yes. Where are our manners? Sister, this is our friend Silver Quill. Young Silver Quill, this is our dear sister, although I'm sure they aren't already aware of that.
Luna giggled a bit, pleased with herself for helping to break the ice a bit. Silver laughed inwardly at Luna's silliness and brought himself up to his full height to address the princess. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Princess Celestia," he said with a deep bow. Celestia laughed and said,
Please, any friend of my sister's is a friend of mine. Just call me Princess
Celestia stopped mid-sentence in confusion. She looked quizzically at Silver Quill, who grinned right back at her. She then chuckled and said,
Well, I didn't see that coming.
Through Luna's descriptions of her sister as an individual, and not just as a princess, Silver Quill could tell that she wasn't very fond of being worshipped by other ponies all the time. He knew that addressing her by just her name alone could be seen as presumptuous, and that she wouldn't like it if he said, Your Majesty, so he did the next best thing. When Celestia smiled at Silver Quill again, it was more sincere.
Well, Silver Quill, I'm sure you must be wondering why you're here.
He nodded at her, and she continued.
I will admit, when my sister came up to me asking me to arrange a temporary residence for you outside of Canterlot, I was a little confused. But she was adamant, and I know my sister well enough to know that when she gets an idea in her head, there's no way to get it out.
Luna grinned, more so to herself than anyone else.
I was even more surprised when she asked me to arrange your vacation in Ponyville of all places. But still, she has her reasons. And then she asked me if it was possible to ask my student, Twilight Sparkle, if you would be able to stay with her.
Silver Quill's eyebrows rose higher and higher with each revelation. Why had Luna been so insistent on him staying in a town he'd never been to, and with a pony he'd never met?
At first, I was confused, but it makes sense when you think about it. Luna told me that you are a writer and that you are looking for a change of scenery for inspiration.
He nodded again, looking from one princess to the next.
Well, if that's the case, then I think this may be the perfect place for you. My student, you see, lives in and manages the only library in Ponyville, one that has more than enough space for a few ponies to live in it.
Silver Quill thought about this. Living in a library? In a quiet, small town with nothing to do but leisurely read the time away? This idea was sounding more appealing by the minute. I think that sounds like a lovely idea, Princess Celestia, but I do have one question. For both of you, actually. They looked at him expectantly. Why would you two go through all this trouble just for me? He asked. Luna gave him a big smile and simply said,
Because thou art our friend, young Silver Quill.
Silver's eyes widened at that, and he returned her smile with one of his own rare ones. Celestia's eyes were unreadable as she looked at her sister, then at Silver Quill. She thought for a few seconds before offering her own answer.
And I am doing this because my sister asked me to, and because I think it would be good for my student to make a new friend.
Luna nodded sharply, as though expecting nothing less. But then she frowned slightly as a sudden realization seemed to hit her.
But it all depends on Miss Twilight Sparkle's reply. She may say that she's too busy or doesn't like the idea, or that it would be too much of an inconvenience.
Luna's brow wrinkled slightly as she mulled over all the possible reasons why Silver would not be allowed to stay in Ponyville. But Princess Celestia only laughed.
Why, Luna, you should have more faith in her. I knew that Twilight Sparkle would be perfectly fine with sharing the library for a few weeks. In fact, I was reading the letter she sent me saying so when you two came in.
Luna's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates.
So does that mean to say that Silverquill will be going to Ponyville?
Her voice had gotten unnaturally low in her strange excitement. Silver still couldn't fathom why she was acting like this. Celestia looked at Luna strangely, no doubt due to Luna's abnormal behavior as well.
Well, if Silverquill would like to go to Ponyville for his vacation, then yes, that is what I'm saying.
Luna's eyes snapped in Silverquill's direction. He looked from one princess to the other. After some thought and consideration, he nodded. A smile so large that there was no way for it to not be painful bloomed on Luna's face. Her whole body trembled, and Silver could just hear a high-pitched squeeing sound coming from within her throat. The combined effect kind of reminded him of a boiling tea kettle. Celestia cleared her throat.
Luna, I think it would be best if you went to sleep now. I'll handle the rest.
Luna nodded and said her goodbyes to her sister and her friend, although they seemed to be rather half-hearted. She was lost in her strange mind by the time she reached the door. Celestia and Silverquill stared after her. Celestia was the first to regain her composure and break the newfound silence.
All right, now, your train leaves at 3:30, so you have plenty of time to pack what you need.
Her horn lit up as she spoke and levitated a small piece of paper, his ticket, from her desk. Silver took it in his own telekinetic grasp and looked up at the princess. Thank you very much, Princess Celestia. I'm very grateful. Celestia nodded idly. Silver took this as his cue to leave, so he said his goodbyes and walked toward the door. Before he could open it, however, he was stopped by the princess's voice behind him.
Wait just a moment, if you will, Silverquill.
He paused and turned to look at her. Is there something else, Princess Celestia? At this point, Celestia seemed to have dropped all of her royal demeanor as she spoke to him.
Before you leave, I just wanted to say thank you. For being friends with Luna, I mean.
Silver was pretty sure he knew exactly what she was talking about, but figured he wanted to see what she had to say. Why do you thank me for that, Princess? Celestia looked at him as though they were both completely normal ponies, and when she spoke, it was as though he was no different than her.
When my sister first came back to Equestria, she wasn't the same pony as she always has been. She was quieter, more reserved, and definitely not happy. But since she met you, she's been slowly becoming more and more like the little sister I know and love. I think you are a major part of that change. The way she called you her friend earlier convinces me of that. So thank you.
Silverquill looked at her for a moment, then nodded. You're very welcome, Princess. Luna has been quite the good friend to me, so I'm glad I've been helpful for her. Celestia nodded, her eyes twinkling at him.
I'm happy to hear that. Now, I think you should go and get ready for your trip.
Silverquill nodded again and turned to leave, but stopped on an impulse. He turned around again. One more thing. Princess Celestia, I don't mean to pry or anything, but do you know why Luna was so excited? Princess Celestia's face was completely deadpan when she replied with,
I'm afraid I haven't the faintest clue.
Silverquill was unconvinced, but he accepted the answer nevertheless. So he said goodbye once more and left. Princess Celestia waited a few seconds after the door had closed, and then let out the laughter that had been building up inside of her. Truth be told, she knew exactly why her sister was acting extra eccentric today. Luna always had been something of a romantic, and there wasn't a doubt in Celestia's mind that there was another reason that Luna was so insistent that he stay with Twilight Sparkle. She chuckled softly to herself, idly wondering what will come out of this. Silverquill had everything he may need with him as he boarded the train to Ponyville. Some light reading for the ride there, a fair amount of bits to last him throughout the day, some writing materials just in case, and other essentials. He looked around and found a seat that wasn't close to any pony else. He needed to be alone with his thoughts right now, watching the scenery pass him by through the window.